Hello! We are so glad that you are interested in Northeast SARE's three large grant programs: Research and Education, Research for Novel Approaches, and Professional Development. Although the calls for pre-proposals and full proposals are released in 2024, the awards will be made in 2025, which is why we call these the 2025 programs. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Northeast SARE. The Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, or SARE, program is funded by the United States Department of Agriculture, and we offer grants in education to farmers, educators, service providers, researchers, and others to address key issues affecting the sustainability of agriculture throughout our region. We serve a region that spans from Maine to West Virginia, including Washington, D.C. The work we do and the projects we fund are grounded in our outcome statement. I'll read it for you. Northeast agricultural communities honor the holistic connection among land, water, air, and all living beings. Agriculture in the Northeast is accessible, sustainable, and just, addressing historic and current inequities so all farmers and farm employees can steward resources to ensure sustainability, resilience, economic viability, and a high quality of life. The purpose of this video is to help you, as potential applicants, to understand the differences between the Research and Education Professional Development Program and Research for Novel Approaches grant programs, and to determine which might be the best fit for your ideas. We want to support your potential for success by identifying components of a strong pre-proposal and empowering you to feel comfortable reaching out to us, the Northeast SARE staff, with questions. We hope to achieve this by introducing you to our grant administrators and a grantee. My name is Nevin Dawson, and I am the Professional Development Program Associate Coordinator. I work with Katie Campbell-Nelson to manage the Professional Development Grant Program and our State Coordinator Program. I first got involved with SARE as a grad student when I worked on a project with historically underserved farmers in North Carolina. I later served as the State Coordinator for University of Maryland, running projects on soil health, and then gradually transitioned into my current staff role. I love seeing the diversity of education models used by our grantees and state coordinators and a passion for personal and organizational growth throughout every level of SARE. I'd like to begin by going over our timeline for large grants. The first step is to submit a pre-proposal. These are due on August 6th, 2024 by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Applicants will be notified of their pre-proposal status on September 3rd, 2024. All applicants will be notified of their status at this time. Applicants with successful pre-proposals will receive the information needed to submit a full proposal. All applicants will receive a summary of reviewers' comments about the proposal, and successful pre-proposal applicants will receive these on the same day. Comments for unsuccessful pre-proposals will be sent at a later date. The full proposal is due on October 29th, 2024 by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The official decision on awarded projects is made by our Administrative Council in late February 2025. The contract start date for all projects is March 1st, 2025. It is up to each applicant to set their own project start date, which can be later than March 1st. Northeast SARE staff will hold virtual meetings to orient and support new grantees in March 2025. Contracts are generally finalized by SARE and the awardee in April 2025. As part of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice strategic plan, we paused 5 of our grant programs for the 2023 to 2024 cycle. This gave us the staff capacity we needed to begin the process of reorganizing our structure and redesigning our grant programs. We are grateful for the time, wisdom, and leadership that our working group members continue to share with us as we work to transform our grant making to be more equitable and accessible, and we are excited about the changes that are slowly starting to roll out. Two brand new initiatives that we are incredibly excited to share are a grant program dedicated to benefiting Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, and a network of contracted technical assistance providers across the Northeast region dedicated to helping applicants write strong project proposals. Look for news on these programs in late fall 2024. Visit our DEIJ landing page to learn more about our DEIJ work. A link is in the description. The three programs that we are discussing here are largely unchanged for the current cycle. However, our grant-making redesign working group is actively rebuilding our programs from the ground up, and it is possible that substantial changes will be implemented in the 2025 to 2026 cycle. Next, we'll talk about an example of a DEIJ-related change that we have been able to implement during this grant cycle. We have reshaped the way that we ask about and score engagement with historically underserved farming communities. We still encourage connections with underserved and especially BIPOC farming communities. The response to the question on the screen is no longer optional, and the responses regarding connections to communities and engagement with these audiences is now scored. In order to receive the highest possible score, the project must engage with at least one historically underserved farming community, as defined by the USDA. However, this is not a requirement to submit a proposal. Those invited to submit full proposals will be expected to demonstrate an authentic connection with the farming communities the project will serve, including those indicated with checked boxes.
I'm going to talk a bit about who can apply. We accept applicants from all kinds of organizations, including extension, colleges, and universities, for-profit businesses, including consultants and farmers, municipalities, nonprofits, tribal governments, and state and federal departments. Applicants and their host organizations may be located outside of the Northeast region as long as the project activities and the audience served are located primarily within the Northeast region. Here's a chart of all 6 of our public-facing competitive grant programs. Note that the partnership grant is not one of the larger grant programs, and we won't be focusing on it today, but it does have a similar range of eligible applicants as our larger grant programs and can be a great starting point for projects that need more groundwork before being able to justify a proposal in one of the larger grant programs. These bottom 3 are the ones that we will focus on today. First, I'll talk a bit about the differences between each of these programs. The research and education and professional development grant programs both require a performance target. You can think of the performance target as the outcome of your project if everything went exactly to plan. The presentations on these programs later on today will have a lot more detail on what this means. Each program funds a different type of work or audience. A research and education project must include a robust farmer education program that will result in measurable on-farm changes, and those would be described by the performance target. And these changes should lead to greater sustainability. The focus on farmer behavior change is a key requirement of this grant program. The project may also include an applied research component that supports the education program. This is not required. Applicants are generally researchers, farmers, educators, and others who work with farmers. A Research for Novel Approaches project must include a strong proof of concept applied research component intended to confirm the benefits and/or feasibility of new practices and approaches that have high potential for adoption by farmers in the near future. Applicants are generally researchers of all different kinds and can come from any of the eligible organizations previously mentioned, such as community organizations, consultants, or traditional research institutions. A professional development project provides education for educators and service providers who work with farmers. These service providers then use what they've learned through participation in project activities in their work with farmers, as described by the performance target. Applicants are generally people who work with farmers, educators, and/or other kinds of service providers. The minimum funding level for each program is $30,000. There is no actual funding cap for these programs, but proposals funded typically request no more than $250,000 for research and education, $200,000 for research for novel approaches, and $150,000 for professional development, depending on the project's complexity and duration. Now I'll talk a little bit about the similarities between all three of these large grant programs. For all of them, the project duration is 1 to about 3 years. A pre-proposal is required for all three. All three require collaborators. This takes the form of an advisory committee, which is not required to be defined until the full proposal phase. And the advisory committee will consist of at least 2 farmers and 1 agricultural service provider. It is required that this committee provides input on project design and implementation. Expenses that are eligible for Northeast SARE funds include labor, materials and supplies, or things that get used up throughout the course of a project, services, meeting and training expenses, subawards to other organizations, indirect costs up to 10%, and project-specific equipment. Ineligible expenses include those costs used to start or expand farming operations, like regular farm equipment like a tractor, or land or structures. These are not allowed. So, what is a pre-proposal? A pre-proposal is a preliminary concept document that allows SARE reviewers to select the most promising projects to be invited to submit full proposals. These are generally only 1,000 to 1,500 words in length. Pre-proposals are intended to save time for both applicants and reviewers. Applicants don't have to develop the full details required for a full proposal just to see if the idea will fly. And reviewers don't have to spend time reading all of those details if they know that the idea or the concept is not fundable. Pre-proposals are required for all three of the large grant programs that we're talking about in this video. Applicants are only invited to submit full proposals if the pre-proposal has a strong database justification. In the research and education and professional development programs, a clear and measurable performance target and effective approaches to achieving that target are also required. Projects must strive for a wider adoption of sustainable practices and must be clearly grounded in our outcome statement. An individual project leader or principal investigator may not submit more than 2 pre-proposals per grant program per year, so that's a total of 6. If you submit multiple pre-proposals and more than one of them is invited to submit a full proposal, you may only select one of those invited pre-proposals to submit a full proposal across all 3 programs. Here are a few more details that may help you with planning your pre-proposal. Northeast SARE does not require host organization approval at the pre-proposal phase, which means that you don't need to submit a form signed by your organizational official. Although, keep in mind, your organization may have its own policies about internal review, even for pre-proposals. We no longer ask for any budget information in the pre-proposal. However, a detailed budget is required as part of the full proposal. Funds are reimbursed on a net 30-day basis. This does mean that your organization must make initial payment for project expenses, but we work hard to process your invoices as quickly as possible. Matching funds are not required by SARE. They are not encouraged and do not increase a proposal's ranking. Results of funded projects are part of the public domain. Contact us as soon as possible to request disability-related accommodations.
Greetings. Hello, my name is Caitlin Cerna, and my background before coming to Northeast SARE has really been across the food system and value chains, starting up with growing on a farm as a first-generation farm in Northeast Ohio with my family, and then spending the last decade or so in upstate New York, working with farm and food businesses on value chain development and marketing, as well as working in community gardens and youth education with other agricultural nonprofits. And so this is my first year managing the Research for Novel Approaches program, but I'm really excited by the ingenuity that I've seen come out of the program already, and the time I've been able to review some different grant reports and things of that nature. And I'd just say, you know, as a multifaceted farmer, I guess, and cross-disciplinary educator, I just have really enjoyed in this program the combination of sort of lab and social benefits working together, which is often the case in the Novel Approaches program. So these applied research projects are designed to confirm the benefits and/or feasibility of new practices and approaches. Novel approaches in agriculture, there should be, you know, some existing evidence of previous experiments or pilot projects with either your own previous work that you've been doing or others that you've been observing or have read about and researched on. But you want to be taking those previous experiments and projects and suggest that a practice or approach is beneficial and feasible. And that is beneficial and feasible, but that it needs a little bit further testing, data, refinement, before it can really be recommended as a widespread adoption for farmers in the Northeast. So these practices and approaches may be related to production, marketing, business management, human resource management, and other social issues or topics just broadly related to sustainable agriculture. And the program here was born out of the desire to fund new practices and approaches that need additional testing or refinement before recommending those things for farmer adoption. So the work that comes out of this program is of strong interest to farmers across the Northeast, and producer need is really central to the success of awarded proposals. The Research for Novel Approaches program shares the same applicant eligibility requirements for our other two large grant programs. It does not require an educational component, and it does not use performance targets as a metric to track adoption or behavioral change. So that's the main difference between Novel Approaches and the other two large grant programs. And this one is purely research-driven funding that kind of tracks the support and demonstrates the likelihood of farmer adoption in the near future. So it's really important in your proposal process to make the distinction that this grant program does not fund exploratory research. There has to be some pre-existing understanding that you are using as a base to do further research and education. And the 2025 call for proposals, there is $1.8 million available in total funding. Funded projects are typically in the $30,000 to $200,000 range, and project length can be either 1, 2, or 3-year projects. For the 2025 call, 1 and 2 year projects must be completed by November 30th, 2027, and 3-year projects by November 30th, 2028. This is one of Northeast SARE's most competitive grant programs. So on average, we expect to receive around 80 pre-proposals, which a little over a third will be invited to submit a full proposal. And then of those full proposals, we typically expect about 30% of them to be funded. So this is often like 8 to 10 total projects. And like I said, it is competitive, more competitive of some of our other grant programs that we have. And this grant program is for researchers who work with farmers looking to fund proof of concept projects. So project leaders can be personnel from agricultural communities, community nonprofit organizers, federal agencies, even for-profit business entities, tribal governments, colleges and universities. So, you know, there's a lot of different options for project leaders. And just to define, by proof of concept, we mean that evidence from prior experiments or prior pilot projects strongly suggests a practice or approach is beneficial and feasible, and that the additional testing, additional research, more data is needed before we can really recommend this as a more widespread adoption. And this includes practices or approaches that have been proven successful outside of the Northeast, but maybe require additional testing or refinement to make it beneficial in a specific region. When applying, keep in mind that a successful research for novel approaches proposal needs to clearly explain the gap in research results that clearly prevents the promotion of the practice. Strong proposals need to include a clear path to adoption by farmers, that the research proves the approach is feasible. For this reason, novel approaches that have a high likelihood for success, but depend on like a cost prohibitive technology, for example, would not be very competitive unless a plan was in place to make the technology accessible for the average grower or farmer. And my tip for potential applicants is that you should always be really conscious to write your proposal with the reviewers in mind. So plan to write for a mixed audience and assume that reviewers have agricultural knowledge, but not necessarily deep expertise in your very specific niche area of your proposal subject. So because of this, it's best to keep your writing very clear and simple, avoid acronyms and technical jargon, and just know that the reviewers do have an agricultural background, but not necessarily that specific expertise in the area that you might be exploring. Now I want to just share with you an example of a successful project. So this recently funded project supports the Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance, a collective of BIPOC seed growers to enhance the market viability of culturally meaningful and regionally adapted seed in the Northeast, in order to strengthen the cultural appropriateness and the climate resilience of the food system. And so just to kind of highlight why reviewers thought that this was a strong proposal. Establishing farmer interest is really central to a successful novel approaches proposal. And it's important that your application makes the case that farmers are asking for this work and like are looking for more information in this area. And also that there is a high potential for adoption and that this approach could be really beneficial. Like we want to have that buy-in that this will truly have an impact. And so the Ujamaa project here presented both regional and state-specific survey data. It also cited conference and workshop attendance numbers as evidence to support, farmer interest in their planned work and what they were going to continue to research. And additionally, the project is farmer-driven and growers are embedded at really every phase of the project development and planned research activities. So that starts with, bi-weekly meetings and the development of a farmer-led research team. And the project really intentionally made space for meaningful engagement. And I think that's a really important distinction, but meaningful engagement and feedback from farmer stakeholder groups. And reviewers really appreciated the project's emphasis on building trust and mutual support networks for the growers kind of involved in the work. And as mentioned, a successful novel approaches proposal needs to bridge that knowledge gap that prevents the practice or approach from being adopted today. And in this case, this proposal made it really clear to reviewers why further value chain research was needed to support the development of this market for culturally meaningful seed. The project fulfills the kind of like proof of concept framework by building on successful models of the global South, where impoverished smallholder farmers have successfully linked culturally meaningful crop varieties to competitive market opportunities. And by adapting strategies of poor value chain development, the project aims to establish a methodology for other agricultural producers to develop markets for products containing important social and cultural value in this sort of like economic, but also ecological value as well. So that's that sort of like science and social meeting each other was really displayed well in this project proposal. And then finally, a competitive novel approaches proposal needs to have sound research design that includes, treatments, methods, data collection, and analysis that are really well designed to test your research question and easy for reviewers to, understand what you're trying to research and what your potential of impact is there. And reviewers agreed that the participatory mixed methods design of this particular project highlighted the project very well and was detailed and referenced back to like clearly laid out project objectives. So the data collection plan included an in-depth timeline of research activities and deliverables, making it really easy for reviewers to kind of assess what would be happening at each phase of the project and planned work. And whether your research is, in the field or in the lab or collected through, community groups, focus groups, interviews, it's really important to be as detailed as possible about your approach. If reviewers are kind of left wondering about the design of your experiment or the sample size or data collection protocols, your proposal is likely to score less than other competitively in that batch that address those points. Like you really need to be very clear and tell that story in a very linear way that is easy for a reviewer to understand. And I just want to say this is one of many successful grant proposals that we have awarded. You can search for other funded Research for Novel Approaches programs at projects.sare.org and search for the project type research only. And that will show you some other projects that we've funded and maybe even taking a look to see if there's been other funded proposals that are in your topic area to kind of see what has historically excited reviewers, though our reviewers change annually. So it's not a easy like shoe in that sense, but it is good research to understand where other work has been done and where Northeast SARE reviewers have shown some interest in the past.
Welcome. This video is for anyone interested in the Northeast SARE Professional Development Grant Program. I'm Katie Campbell Nelson, and I manage this program with Nevin Dawson. Nevin is in the Caroline County Extension Office at the University of Maryland, and I'm based out of the Cornell Cooperative Extension, Columbia and Greene County office in Acre, New York. You can contact either one of us if you have questions. I've been an agricultural educator most of my career, teaching for the Stockbridge School of Agriculture and as a vegetable extension educator in Massachusetts. As a service provider who supports farmers, I know we don't always prioritize our own learning, but to be really good at and to love our work, we need professional development. And that's why I enjoy managing this grant program. I have a tip for you if you're applying for any Northeast SARE grant. With Nevin, we also manage and offer education for a group of state coordinators from West Virginia to Maine. There's a state coordinator located at each land grant institution in the Northeast. They have a much better picture of what's happening locally in your states than I do, and they're available as a resource to help answer your questions or direct you to a staff member at Northeast SARE. The professional development team is here to help you. This grant program is for the benefit of service providers who work with farmers. A service provider is someone who primarily works with farmers or is being trained to. Some examples of those who may not typically work with farmers include lawyers and real estate agents who are working on farm succession planning. For these proposals to be successful, they must indicate a strong interest from service providers to participate, and the relationship between service providers and farmers must be strong and well described. Total funding available for this grant program is around $1 million. And the typical amount per grant program ranges between $30,000 to $150,000 per grant. This is one of Northeast SARE's least competitive grant programs, so you should apply to keep Nevin and I busy. We've typically received about 25 applications per year. 80% of those submitted may be invited to apply, and 50% of those may succeed. Currently, the Research and Education and Professional Development grants are the only two Northeast SARE grant programs that require a performance target. A research and education grant performance target measures a behavior change in farmer participants, while the professional development grant performance target measures a behavior change among service providers who work with farmers. This program's performance target has 3 required parts. Follow along with this example. First, the number of service providers who will take action to assist farmers. Here it is 17 tribal farm staff will participate in train the trainer workshops and expand their capacity as agricultural service providers to develop culturally relevant curricula on 5 topics. The actions that these service providers will take to assist farmers is the second component. In this example, the 17 tribal farm staff will deliver 36 workshops. And the third component is the number of farmers who will be assisted by the service providers. In this example, 150 subsistence and direct market farmers in 6 tribal nations. Optionally, a farmer performance target may be included. In this grant program, 40 of these farmers will begin or expand a sustainable agriculture project as a result of attending an agricultural service provider instructed community class. Often the farmer performance target has fewer farmers implementing a new practice because more farmers will typically try something new or attend learning than will implement a practice in the long run. So try this out for yourself using your own project idea. If you have pen and paper, try to imagine working backwards to figure out how many service providers you would recruit or you already work with, what they really want or need to keep engaged in supporting their education, and ultimately how many farmers they may work with. A performance target is an outcome for your program. Be as specific as possible. This is not a guarantee, but a realistic goal. And don't overpromise. It will just stress you out. I'd like to share with you a professional development grant program example. The Northeast Climate Adaptation Fellowship to support vegetable and fruit farmers with project leader Rachel Shatman from the University of Maine. This was a strong proposal because the relationship between service providers and farmers were strong and well described. The farmers and service providers received stipends to allow them to design or even implement a climate adaptation strategy together. Reviewers liked this strong peer aspect of this proposal. This project also connected many agricultural service provider networks and farmers from 12 states. The Climate Adaptation Fellowship had a strong education plan and team. In this photo from Ryan Fitzbeauchamp, who is a climate adaptation fellow and farmer, he's rolling sweet clover for a tarped no-till planting. This is an example of a climate adaptation strategy because rather than tilling the soil, releasing carbon, he instead captured the carbon in the soil while the sweet clover released nutrients for the following season's crop. I love this photo. Look at the down pressure action in the front bucket, knocking down this crop of sweet yellow clover. Ryan says he learned a lot in this project, including something about managing weeds. Thanks for listening and be in touch.
This video is designed to provide guidance to anyone considering applying to Northeast SARE's Research and Education Grant Program. Hi, my name is Heather Omand, and I'm the Associate Director of Northeast SARE. In that role, I'm also the Grant Coordinator for the Research and Education Grant Program. Before I came to Northeast SARE, I worked with farmers on business, market, and whole farm planning. Doing that work, I was exposed to the incredible innovation and practical knowledge that I saw expressed in unique ways on every farm I visited. I love working with this grant program because farmer engagement, leadership, and education are the core components. So the Research and Education Grant Program is designed explicitly to directly benefit farmers. There is $2,250,000 allocated in total funding to this grant program for the 2022 to 2023 cycle. Funded projects are typically in the $30,000 to $250,000 range, depending on a project's complexity and duration. Research and education projects typically last 2 to 3 years. We often receive around 70 pre-proposals for this grant program, of which half will be invited to submit full proposals. Of those that do submit full proposals, around 30% will be funded, often 10 to 15 total projects. All typical success rates in any of our videos are based on historical numbers of submissions and could change if the number of submissions changes. The core focus of a strong research and education proposal is farmer adoption and behavior change that leads to greater sustainability. Thus, education that brings about behavior change is the only required component. And we fund many strong research and education proposals with and without research components. A strong research and education proposal that includes research will make it clear that the education plan can stand on its own, regardless of the outcome of the research. So the achievement of the performance target cannot depend on research results. Research, when included, is clearly related to the education plan and would create new information that could be incorporated into that plan. One tip I can offer applicants is to pay attention to the review criteria that's included in the call for proposals when applying to any Northeast SARE grant program. Try on a reviewer's mindset. Does this project seem grounded in Northeast SARE's outcome statement? Does the proposal clearly respond to the question and review criteria? So this slide includes several examples of performance targets from successful funded research and education proposals. The easiest way to think about a performance target is the best possible outcome if everything in your project goes to plan. It should clearly relate to the statement of need in your proposal, and it guides the development of your educational activities. Performance targets for this program should include 4 components. The first component is the number of farmers. So in the first example on this slide, you can see 100 farmers. The second component of a performance target is the specific change or new practice that those farmers will adopt. So 100 farmers will adopt the use of integrative parasite control on their farms. The third component of a performance target is the extent of farmer adoption. So in this example, adoptions of these techniques will be utilized in 2,000 or more sheep and/or goats. And then finally, the fourth component is the measurable benefit to farmers who adopt this new practice or change. So again, from this example, farmers will save an estimated $28 per head in reduced chemical dewormer usage. All performance targets must include these 4 components, and they should be as specific as possible. A performance target is not a guarantee, and we at Northeast SARE understand it's not a guarantee. It is realistic and ambitious. The scope of impact entirely depends on what is reasonable and appropriate to your project. Remember, if you're invited to submit a full proposal, you will need to clearly outline how you will verify and document each of the 4 components of the performance target. If funded, you're going to be asked to report against each of those components as well. So some tips on how to write a strong performance target. The key here is really that ambitious and realistic. Reviewers seriously consider the scope of impact and whether applicants have fully considered the quality of impact and what is realistically possible. It's not all about the numbers. This can vary significantly depending on the type of project. Sometimes 20 farmers and a total of 5 acres is ambitious and realistic, like with urban agriculture, or in the third example on this slide. And sometimes 100 farmers and 2,000 acres is more appropriate, for example, with agronomic crops. There is no one size fits all with performance targets. I'm going to finish by sharing a really strong example of a research and education proposal and project. And this project is called Teaching Black Farmers in Baltimore City to Grow Ethnic Crops for Black Communities. It's led by Denzel Mitchell at the Farm Alliance Baltimore. This project created a training program for beginning Black farmers in Maryland. They utilize classroom learning, field day instruction, and farmer-to-farmer mentorship. They focused on producing locally relevant crops and developing markets with Black business owners. The project leaders leveraged partnerships at both the University of Maryland and in local city governments. So why was this a strong proposal and then a strong project? Well, there was well-documented, strong farmer engagement in the project design and implementation. There was clear evidence throughout the proposal that the organization and project team are embedded in and understand the community of farmers they work with, and the team included and compensated leadership from that community. There was a strong educational approach that utilized a diversity of activities, including classroom time with readings, videos, and guest farmer speakers, hands-on field days with transportation provided, farmer-to-farmer mentorship where all parties were compensated for time and expenses, one-to-one coaching from the project team, and additional opportunities for practicing new farming techniques in the field. Reviewers felt the performance target was specific, verifiable, realistic, and yet ambitious. It was well grounded in the statement of need, and the educational plan was clearly designed to lead to the performance target, that crucial outcome. Reviewers felt the education plan could proceed and enhance sustainable agriculture in the Northeast, regardless of the research outcomes. And the research was well designed to complement the education plan as both an effort to develop enterprise budgets for culturally relevant crops and as an in-depth assessment of the impact of the program on food sovereignty in the community. Both farmers and community members are and will be engaged in the research design and efforts. So those are some strong components of a research and education proposal. Thanks for listening. If questions come up after today, please feel free to reach out via email to me, Heather Omand, at heather.omand@uvm.edu. Thanks so much. And now I am so excited to introduce Dr. Kwame Matthews, who is the grantee that's going to be speaking with us today and answering questions if you have them. And Dr. Matthews is a research and extension professional at Delaware State University, which is an 1890 land grant institution and a historically Black university. Kwame has been a project leader on a few different Northeast SARE grants, most recently a research and education grant titled Increasing the Use of Natural Fungus to Control Internal Parasites in Small Ruminants. Thank you again, Kwame, for your time. And would you be willing to start by just saying, why have you chosen to invest your valuable time in applying for Northeast SARE grants?
First, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invite, Heather. I would like to say that I put time in investing time into Northeast SARE grants because it fits very well with what I want to do as a small ruminant specialist. It fits perfect with research and extension as it provides significant funding to allow me to complete projects that will benefit farmers. These projects that benefit farmers will not just be beneficial to my program, but the farmers will improve sale and improve production, as most of my research projects are geared towards parasites. When we try to get projects from the Northeast SARE, I tend to look into what directly does the farmer want, what is going to help to impact that farmer, and then I'll write accordingly. So with that being said, most of the time what I'll try to do is try to find out how this SARE grant can help to bring equipment that is used for research and education, and also help with getting the message across to producers and to consumers about eating small ruminant meat. The Northeast SARE grants that I have worked with is normally very organized. It is normally going to help with producing good investment for the farmers. And to be honest, it covers funds that sometimes our universities do not have. So at an 1890 institution, most of the time we do not start working with startup costs or with startup funding. And Northeast SARE provides that startup funding because of a smaller grant. You can start from partnership, and with research and education, you can build on that partnership with farmers, and then you try to educate the farmers into the best fit of how to become very good at their production systems. I hope that answered your questions.
Thank you. It's perfect. What else would you like to share with folks about your experiences applying for and managing SARE grants?
So applying for SARE grants is actually a very good program. I enjoy applying because I can get to talk to the program leaders and they'll give you insight into exactly what you will need when you're doing the grant. So when you communicate with anyone from SARE, they'll give you the information necessary, and then you can formulate the grant to fit what you want. The best thing that I say is normally to write a grant when we're designing the grant, I look at how will this benefit a farmer. After I design the grant to benefit the farmer, I look at the idea, is this grant something that is readable by anyone outside of research or education? Because SARE is made up of, or the reviewers for SARE is made up of people from different walks of life. And therefore, you might not get only researchers, you might not get only extension specialists, but you might end up with a farmer that wants to make sure this is applicable to them. With the SARE grant, one point I should make is that SARE grant requires a detailed budget. And when SARE grant requires that detailed budget, it can be beneficial and it can also be challenging. It is beneficial because it gets you to think about everything that you think you will need for this project. And you start looking up pricing so that you don't make mistakes and put things in there that you don't need. When it comes to the challenge is that it is going to cost you to look through everything. The budgets that you write for SARE, it tells you detailed information. And in the past, I thought that SARE never funded equipment until I learned that SARE actually fund equipment for educational purposes. And the equipment they fund, they might for farmers, it's only partially for the duration of the project. So those are things I think about when we're writing the grants. Now, when you're writing the SARE grant, you want to make sure the language is clear. So one thing that I do when I write my SARE grant is give it to someone else to read. Particularly, I give it to most of my undergraduate students so that they can read through it and tell me I understood it or I didn't understand it. And if my students didn't understand it, then I reword and rewrite the grant to match where someone else that is not thinking science can read the grant and understand it. So those are some of the techniques that I think have made it successful for me to get a SARE grant. Another thing that I look at is the actual processing of SARE. Because SARE, on the SARE side of everything, it is easy to deal with the SARE personnel. When you come to the 1890 institution, a lot of 1890 institutions do not have all the hands on deck for the Office of Sponsored Programs and different offices. And therefore, starting out very early with this grant is critical because then I can give that information. I can get all the signatures and get all the paperwork that is needed for any grant programming to go through. On the SARE side, if I have a question or if I have a problem on my side to get a signature, I can get documentation from anyone at SARE. And therefore, once those are submitted, then it makes my life easier. With the SARE grant as well, it is geared towards farmers, and therefore, like the grant that is listed here, the educational portion of the grant is very important. I make sure that we're educating farmers as much as possible. And in the case of dealing with farmers, most of my grants are written with farmer input. So most of the grants have some farmer input. I have several farmers that give me input to say if the grant makes sense for them, if the grant makes sense for Delaware, and then I will move forward with that. Thank you, Heather.
Beautiful. One more question for you, Kwame. What advice would you share with anyone who's thinking about applying, who may be working with or coming from organizations with fewer staff or overall less access to resources?
So it is important to stay organized. It is very important that you communicate with the host organization. So communicate with the staff ahead of time and try to get those required documents signed off before you start submitting the document. With the SARE grants, normally for pre-proposals, as said, if there's a pre-proposal, you don't need the AOR to sign off on it. But after the pre-proposal has been accepted, then you will need signatures from many people in the campus. And at that point, or in your organization, at that point, you want to ensure that you're staying ahead of the game. Writing SARE grants can be very easy. Again, SARE, the personnel that work at SARE will help you in the sense of getting the documentation done. They'll tell you what you need, who you need to talk to, and definitely it spells it out in the proposal. But if you're not clear on something, or in the RFA, but if you're not clear on something, you can always contact one of the SARE personnel and they will assist you in doing so.
Thank you so much for your interest in Northeast SARE's 3 large grant programs. We hope that what we have shared in this video will help you decide whether one of these programs is a good match for your ideas. Please visit our website at northeast.sare.org to check out additional applicant resources. These include a video on the mechanics of how to apply, Northeast SARE's definition of a farm, last year's call for full proposals, and information on our 3 small grant programs, and lots more. Please do get in touch with our grant administrators with any questions. There's a link below. We hope to see your name on a Northeast SARE pre-proposal soon.